During last week's City Council meeting at Barrie City Hall, a discussion took place regarding the proposed private tree bylaw, which included deputations and an amendment. 5 deputants were present, including 3 arborists who own private businesses, a resident, and Karen Hansen, the co-owner of Pratt Homes, Barrie's largest developer. Karen Hansen requested an exemption from the new bylaw for the 71-acre land purchased by Pratt Homes from the city, which would save the developer around $1.5 million. Ward 10 Councillor Bryn Hamilton introduced an amendment in response to the deputations, updating the definition of an arborist, which is likely to make it more expensive for ordinary citizens to hire them, and providing an exemption for Pratt Homes. The new bylaw is necessary due to Bill 23, which has removed County Conservation Authority's responsibility for tree removal replanting fees on private properties in the city. The proposed bylaw would require fees for tree removal even in plantation sites outside regulated areas. The new amendment will remove that requirement and will help save Pratt Homes around $1.5 million. The amendment passed unanimously, and the Council is expected to vote on the final version of the bylaw in 2 weeks.
There are 5 deputations this evening regarding motion 23-G-082, private tree bylaw and offsetting ecological review from the second General Committee meeting report dated April the 5th. Please note that in accordance with the City's procedural bylaw, a maximum of 5 minutes is permitted per deputation. I'll call out the names listed on tonight's City Council agenda. Once your name is called and you are joining the meeting in person, please approach the podium to deliver the deputation. If you're joining the Council meeting virtually, please unmute yourself or press number 6 on your phone. I'll now begin the deputations by asking Mark Graves of Ontario Commercial Arborists Association to deliver the deputation. Sir, you have 5 minutes at the podium here.
Thank you very much, Mayor and fellow councillors. I am the representing the Ontario Commercial Arborist Association. I'm their current president. I was here at the request of some of our members for your general committee meeting, and urban forestry is a very challenging subject, as I'm sure you're all learning over the last month. And something struck me at that meeting. It was a comment that was made during the meeting about how the City of Barrie had the framework that had been developed by their staff could lead to very progressive development of future bylaws, and something to be proud of for the City of Barrie. And although every bylaw does have some minor issues or tweaks that always need to be had, I can say by reviewing it and being involved in the process last month that that comment here, it certainly is one of the better bylaws I've seen written. One of the things that really sticks out to me is the use of the term maintenance. I liked how the staff looked at, the resident and their ability to not be restricted by the bylaw should they choose to develop their backyard or develop a pool. And using the term maintenance, which I haven't seen before, allowed for that to happen if you understood the framework with which it was being delivered. The problem with other bylaws is that is often referred to as construction, and construction can be a very limiting aspect. So that was something that really stuck out to me, and I think is very progressive in your bylaw. May need a little bit more refinement for certain circumstances, but I definitely think you're on the right track. The aspect of trying to protect your urban canopy now while you still have it, rather than fight for it later through creation of that tree protection manual. I can see it clearing up some of the concerns that were expressed at that general meeting, and leading to creating that bylaw that you all can be proud of. The challenge that I see in the industry as an arborist is those large lots like some of the older municipalities like the City of Barrie has, where it's a 1940s, 1950s home gets purchased, and there's the opportunity to put 2 or 3 units on that home, often leading to the clear cut of the trees. Using the term construction to try and provide guidelines on how to preserve some of those trees to protect that canopy is something that I've seen all bylaws struggle with in the past. So once again, trying to use the terms maintenance, construction, and development to apply to the 3 different phases, and looking at how to explore the best opportunities for preservations on those are something I do believe you're on the right page, and I would encourage you to continue forward, depending upon how your decision on the bylaw goes tonight. As always, we do appreciate the understanding and desire to look at some of the terminology during the general committee meeting and revise the bylaw to include certified arborists, which was a key component to keeping prices controlled, which was also one of the aspects. And there is something to be aware of where a report may be needed to remove a single tree or do some maintenance. Often that report should be no more than $400 or $500 at max. Most can be achieved by an estimate or a $100 or $200 fee, and a development report which can cost $8, $9, $10, or even more. Obviously, those reports are for businesses that are looking for development, and there obviously are profits being made. So that can be confusing. And I did pick up on that there was an aspect of confusion with regards to the pricing and costs, so just something else to be aware of. Other than that, I just want to thank you for allowing us the ability to put our input in through this process, and allowing our partnerships. I understand ISA Ontario will be speaking possibly next, and the Municipal Arborists and Urban Foresters, which they'll mention, one of their subcommittees definitely has had a hand in previous urban forestry bylaws. But yeah, I want you to all know that I do believe you're on the right page, and I think working towards where you're going, you will produce something, if it's not today, in the very short term, that you all can be proud of, not only today and in the future, but can also provide the prosperity for both a resident, a small business looking to redevelop, and the larger developers at all. We're always available should your staff want to follow up or use us anyway for future information. But for right now, that's all I have to say. I just want to say thank you for taking a very challenging and proactive approach, because urban forestry is in its infancy, and there's definitely can be a lot of misconceptions out there as you go through the process. So thank you for your time, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Graves. Are there any questions from members of council for Mr. Graves? Seeing none, and thank you so much for respecting the timeline as well, sir. I'll now call upon Matt Logan of the International Society of I'm going to not get this right, Arboriculture, Ontario, to deliver the deputation. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It is arboriculture, and you're not the first to stumble upon that word. I would like to thank the Mayor and the councillors for allowing our organization some time to be heard on this matter. I'd like to thank Mark from the OCAA, who we work quite a bit with, who just spoke as well. Just a bit of background, the ISAO is the Ontario chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture, which spearheads the certification of arborists under, and right now, internationally, we have 55,000 certified arborists. The ISAO is in charge of the certification of Ontario arborists. And our mission is to enhance and promote the tree care and benefit of trees for present and future generations in Ontario through education, research, and awareness. Just to mirror some of the things that Mark said, a lot of our concerns did get alleviated and responded to in regards to the amendments introduced by members of councils to allow for certified arborists to submit arborist reports and preservation plans as part of a development project. Within the report from the city, recommendation 5 included a recommendation to form a tree bylaw standards subcommittee that includes representatives from the land development and professional consulting community. We as ISAO could support that role through our Municipal Arborist Urban Forestry Committee by providing municipal benchmarking for member municipalities, many of which have had private tree bylaws in force and in effect in the past. Additionally, we can support through the provision of a body of knowledge from consulting arborists as well as production arborists who have had to navigate through tree bylaws and regulations on a day-to-day basis. We just want to recognize that as certified arborists and as the arboriculture field in general, we see the importance of tree preservation, maintenance, and enhancement in the urban forest, and understand that it is not a black and white scenario, and there's a lot to take in and a lot of interested parties. To that end, much like Mark said, the ISAO itself, as well as the Municipal Arborists and Urban Forestry Committee, would be more than happy to answer any questions, be of reference point or just be of any assistance that we can at this point in time. I thank you very much for your time. And that is all from myself.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Thank you for the deputation and information. Are there any questions from members of council for Mr. Logan? Seeing none, thank you so much. I'll next call upon Johnny Corner of North Shore Tree Experts, Inc. to deliver the deputation. So you have 5 minutes to deliver the deputation.
Thank you for the time. I'm sure most of you are tired of hearing my voice because I've talked to most of you. So I just want to echo what Matt Logan and what Mark Graves said. I do appreciate the amendment for recognizing certified arborist as somebody that can be a part of this bylaw. I do really appreciate the bylaw, I'll be honest. There's a lot out there, and this is definitely one of the better ones from the construction point of view. We definitely need to be protecting our urban trees and making sure that we are keeping our canopy growing. My one thing that I had brought to most of your attention to think of consideration is more from as a local tree service company here in Barrie, as well as a resident in Barrie my whole life. The one thing is just making sure that it's done right. So from the construction point of view, I think it's fantastic. There just, I think, needs to be some clarity on specific private tree removals, pruning, and all that kind of stuff. Because I know there was talks about like receipts, keeping receipts for like a year and stuff like that. And there's not a lot of clarity on how that would work. And I think that it would actually cause more work and a lot more headache for not only residents but also for City of Barrie staff, just in order to be able to police this. I mean, we will definitely get our street police that come out and are going to call all the time they see something happening once they hear something going through. So I do think that should be possibly looked at about being removed. And then the other thing I just wanted to reiterate is making sure you're prioritizing tree planting. I think getting private residents more opportunities and ways to do it that is more financially feasible for them through grant programs and that to get them to plant trees is really key. I personally already do a tree-free tree program with public schools locally, where we go in and donate a certain amount of trees, and we are encouraging children to not only see us plant a tree, but also see how it's done right. And it is kind of cool when you get a guy that climbs trees for a living coming in, and that kind of helps a little bit. But if done well, we can grow our canopy without actually incurring any more costs on residents, but just getting them to love trees. And the one quick way of doing that is that people can basically get trees for free, basically adopt it as one of their family members, and weirdly enough, they will actually appreciate and love the other trees that are on their property. Just as a personal note, I had a tree that had a due date on it when I moved in. I became an arborist, fell in love with trees, and it is now definitely a family heirloom for our family. So my kids have climbed it, I've climbed it. So if you come about it in order to be able to educate the city and be able to promote tree planting and done right, I think this could be a really great opportunity, and using the urban development that's happening as a conduit to be able to make it affordable too. So I appreciate the time. Thank you for the weeks of listening to me. And if you have any questions, feel free. But thank you.
Thanks, Johnny, for coming out this evening. Are there any questions for Johnny? Johnny, can you just jump back up there for me, if that's okay? We had the opportunity with Councillor Corser to speak last night, and so first of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with members of council and for caring enough to reach out to members of council, and for putting up with my kids flying around in the background when we were talking.
No worries.
There was something you said last night that I just wanted to highlight for the city that I thought was really neat. Can you clarify, I think it was a decade ago versus today, the canopy cover in the city of Barrie?
Yeah, so I thought of doing a little research. In 2013, I think it was November 25th, November or 2013, there was a proposed tree bylaw. I think it's the one that we currently have right now, which is the anything over half a hectare, we'd have a private tree bylaw. In that, now I will be honest, it does say that there wasn't an act like they didn't do necessarily, I guess, direct math on it, but based off the numbers, they were saying is that our canopy coverage at that time was around 23 to 25%. Now, there's an argument to say that we've taken over some of Innisfil lately and stuff. So in the most recent report, our canopy coverage is 30.5, which is actually really encouraging, because that technically means is that the city of Barrie over the period of basically almost 10 years has grown its canopy based off those statistics by anywhere between 5 to 8%, which is really good. And I think also just keeps reiterating the point of planting trees. Regulating people on removing them, people will still be removing them. The only advantage is that there will be a dollar amount on it. And I think that the urban development is what's going to really continue to remove our trees. So as long as we continue promoting tree planting and giving it, making it affordable for people to tree plant, I think that would be, like, you can really change the city in that way. So yeah, I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much, Johnny, and thanks for your presentation this evening.
No problem. Thank you.
Next, I'll call upon Kathy Kovach to deliver your deputation. You have 5 minutes to provide the deputation, and members of council will be able to ask questions afterwards if they so choose.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Nuttall and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I do have some photos that I sent, and I'm wondering if they could be put up. So there are, I think, 6 in total, so maybe you could just play them. But this is an oak tree that's next door to my house, and it's probably over 200 years old, and it's in Allendale. So just to give you an idea of the trees that we're most concerned about, which are the big healthy trees, the mature trees, are heritage trees. So if you could just show the next tree. So there, in front of this house was a big silver maple, and unfortunately, just in this past probably year and a half, that tree had to come down, which is unfortunate. It looked healthy to all the neighbors, but one of the big limbs on that tree was overhanging property. There could be damage and probably realistically kill somebody if the limb came down as they were walking by. That tree, I think Kevin confirmed to me, that was over 200 years old too. So that's another tree that in our neighborhood. And you know, those trees are in all of our historic neighborhoods. A lot of these trees, that one in particular is a city-owned tree. I wasn't able to walk into people's backyards to show what kind of trees are in backyards, but similar. The next one, please. They also provide, as you can see, shelter to our animal life in the neighborhood. Not everybody's happy about that, but those, you know, they do provide home to birds and species and animals in the neighborhood. And of course, keep our homes either warmer cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. Can you show the next one? That's a big old linden tree on our street. I love it, and it's also another city tree. So we'll be looking at reaching out to Kevin to see about making that a heritage tree, now that I understand how to do the process. So I'm here to support the upcoming potential changes and updates to our private tree bylaw and ecological offsetting review program. I must say, trying to read through the process of this report was a challenge, as it was for all of you. After watching the General Committee meeting to discuss this issue on April 5th for at least 1 hour, I was pleased to see that our current council is open to changes as presented in the staff report 0PR001-023. We want to take this time to thank Kevin Rankin and the staff for working on the public consultation sessions, reporting on the outcomes, and clarifying what all of this means. Our ongoing and continued growth as directed by the province does and will continue to impact our tree canopy for generations to come, especially our healthy, large, mature trees in established heritage and existing neighborhoods. Can you show the next one, please? That is the tree that I just mentioned that had to come down. So that was, we were very sad. There were tears in the neighborhood. So we are hoping to protect some of our trees through these bylaws. We are very happy to see that this came forward with a number of positive changes. A strong education program, posted permits, marking of trees to be removed, hiring an urban forester and restoration ecologist, creating policies, grants, and partnerships around tree planting are all welcome steps. Of particular interest, Of particular interest was a comment on page 2, paragraph 11. Annually, staff issue approximately 3 to 5 tree removal permits for subdivision or site plan developments, 5 to 8 permits for single lot construction works, example, pool, installation, additions, and 1 permit for woodlot management, thinning and harvesting. Staff also receive and deny 1 to 2 permit application requests annually for clearing forest without having approved site plan, subdivision, or other approved development plans in place. But the most interesting part of this paragraph is detached accessory dwelling units have resulted in an increase in permit issuance over the last 2 years, resulting in approximately 75 trees removed annually. So that would be approximately 150 trees have come down in the last 2 years. And a lot of the accessory dwelling units are in our historic and older neighborhoods, existing neighborhoods where we have the big large trees that are the big boundary trees that we are most concerned about. These are not small numbers in an urban area. In some small part, these changes will continue to have a positive impact on our tree canopy. We are hopeful between these changes and current setbacks for boundary trees, our canopy will thrive. Status quo or doing nothing at this time in our history of remarkable growth, in our view, is not an option, and we fully support the recommended changes. We thank you for your time and consideration. Would be happy to answer any questions. Can you show the last, I think, 2 pictures? No, is that it?
That's an old tree.
Okay.
So thank you for your thank you for your deputation this evening, and we did go about an extra minute, but are there any questions from members of council with regards to deputation? Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation this evening. I'll now call upon Karen Hansen on behalf of Christon Construction, Inc. to deliver the final deputation of this evening. There's 5 minutes allowed for the deputation, but before you begin that, I also wanted to say thank you on behalf of the city to Pratt Homes, who are the presenting sponsor for the air show this year. It was just announced yesterday, and thank you for the corporate support and of what I know is going to be an incredible couple of days here in downtown Barrie.
Thank you very much. It was an exciting announcement yesterday, and we're excited for the air show. Good evening, Mayor Nuttall and esteemed councillors. I am one of the owners of Pratt Homes, a 6th-generation home building business in the city of Barrie. Thank you for the opportunity to make this deputation today. We understand the conservation authorities are no longer responsible for replanting fees related to tree removal on private properties in the city of Barrie. Thus, the need for this new bylaw in front of you today. In the past, conservation authorities collected offsetting fees for replanting trees removed within an ecologically sensitive area or natural heritage preservation areas. Plantation sites outside of these regulated areas, whether designated for development or not, were exempt from tree cutting fees. Specifically, the MVCA policy, section 2.3, states, project applicability is for development applications on lands which are regulated by MVCA, meaning applicable fees were for wetland areas, woodlands, and buffer areas to be removed. LSRCA exemptions further state ecological offsetting will also not be required for woodlands that are plantations. Your bylaw does not allow for this exemption. We have a site that is directly affected. Our site is at 1001 Essa Road, a triangle site approximately 71 acres in size. There are plantation trees on this site outside of the regulated area and would not have previously attracted tree cutting fees. There are also trees inside the regulated natural heritage area. We are not proposing to remove trees or affect canopy coverage within the sensitive regulated area. We are looking for the exemption to apply only to plantation trees that would have previously been exempt from fees. The site was created as a plantation by the County of Simcoe before they sold it to us for development. If this bylaw isn't corrected, it will result in $1,461,650 worth of unanticipated costs, which would unfortunately get added to house prices once this site is developed. We applaud that it is Council's strategic direction to make Barrie an affordable place to live while still replanting trees across our community. Your priorities specifically state that you are looking for options to make homes more attainable. We join you in this commitment, which is why we are speaking up today. In this sensitive home buying environment, we collectively agree that we can't let costs get this much worse. Having embraced Council's strategic direction is why we believe this additional charge was unintentional, and we wanted to make you aware of this oversight so that you can correct it. My deputation suggests an exemption to this new bylaw for the trees on our plantation site. I have asked for this to be site-specific since this is the only plantation site that I have firsthand knowledge of. If Council would prefer to apply this exemption to other plantation sites, and I understand there are only a few of those elsewhere in Barrie, then I would leave it to you to suggest an appropriate revision to the bylaw. Thank you very much for your time and attention on this important matter. I've invited our environmental consultant, Paul Niels from Orion Environmental Solutions. Mayor Nuttall, if you indulge questions from Council, I would be happy for either Paul or myself to assist with any specifics you might have. And thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much for the presentation, the deputation this evening, also bringing the item to our awareness. I'm going to go a little bit outside of the ordinary here because I think that the specific deputation had a bit of a broader reach. And ask CEO Prowse, with regards to the deputation, the questions on some of the NVCA policies versus the LSRCA and now the City of Barrie. I believe that there's been some work done in the background on that. Is that correct? And I think there's some amendment maybe coming this evening on that as well.
Yes, Mayor Nuttall, you are correct. Through some further evaluation by staff, we have come to understand that there was a different approach used by the NVCA versus the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, and I believe Council has in front of them an amendment tonight, which will look to bring that closer.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there questions from members of Council this evening? Councillor Rietman.
Mr. Mayor, this is not necessarily to the delegation, but to staff, and I guess my question is, you've heard the delegation, and is it possible for us to define plantation, or do you see that as being something that is reasonable to do within the context of the bylaw?
Mr. Rankin?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Riepma. Certainly something we could consider looking at defining. Right now, the definition of a plantation applies to fruit and nut orchards, tree nurseries, and specific plantations for that type of commercial purpose, but it doesn't deal with plantations tied to forest management practices.
Councillor Riepma.
Do you, I guess, see this as a reasonable request? And I guess there might be another way to do it, and that is to take a map and put a circle around the plantations, or what we consider to be plantations as well. Is that reasonable?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Riepma, it's certainly something we could consider looking at and come up with some options.
Thank you.
CEO Prowse.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I would just add to that for Council's information. I believe the amendment that staff had done some work on effectively ignored the definition of plantation and really looked to address the regional location of the land itself. Those lands that sat within the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority had a different approach from that Conservation Authority. If I can be so bold, a lower bar than the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, and the amendment, which will be introduced later, I understand, will look to equalize that, Councillor Riepma, instead of addressing the definition of plantation, whether it's appropriate or not, which we felt really wouldn't equalize the two conservation authorities' approach.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be patient.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Councillor Hamilton.
Just a question of clarification, Mr. Prowse, if I can, through you, Mayor Nuttall. So just to be clear then, so prior to Bill 23, the ecological offsetting program was under the purview of the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority and the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority. They handled them, had different approaches. So under the Nottawasaga, any regions in that area, the offsetting program only applied to wetlands, and otherwise woodlands and plantations were exempt, correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton, I'll look to my team to back me up on this, but I think the definitions you used, I think it's broader than that. There's natural heritage features, but there was a specified list that the Nottawasaga applied it to, which I think the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority had a much broader interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. As your representative on the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority, I had an extensive conversation with our CAO about this too, just to get some clarity. So once I knew this was going to come up, and I can confirm by looking at GIS maps and such forth that it doesn't appear this land fits with. It's just ever so slightly south of what's mapped out as wetlands, so it would not be. Build for, there would still be some permitting involved, obviously on the back end when it comes to the development side of things. But yes, the way they were billing at the NVCA is very different than the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, and it was kind of all built in. And again, how those levels of permitting vary from the two, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that the information that's been provided to us tonight is accurate.
Thank you. Are there any other questions with regards to deputations? Seeing none, thank you so much for the deputation tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall and councillors, and Mr. Prowse. It sounds like you read my deputation, so I appreciate you looking further into it, and I look forward to hearing the amendment. Thank you.
I will go ahead and read the amendment. That motion 23G082 of Section D of the Second General Committee Report dated April 5th, 2023, concerning the private tree bylaw and ecological offsetting review be amended as follows. That paragraphs 1 and 2 be deleted and the remaining paragraphs be renumbered accordingly. 2, that private tree bylaw 2014-115 be amended under definitions to add the following definition. Certified arborist means a person who is a specialist or expert in the area of the care and maintenance of trees and includes a graduate of a post-secondary education and agricultural qualified by Skilled Trades Ontario, or a certified arborist qualified by the International Society of Agricultural and a consulting arborist registered with the American Society of Consulting Arborists, a registered professional forester, or a person with other similar qualifications as approved by the director. And number 3, that the following be added to the end of the new paragraph 1, quote, with woodlots with an area greater than 0.5 hectares in the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority areas purchased prior to April 5th, 2023 be exempt from these fees. And 4, that the following be added to the end of new paragraph 3, quote, to explore additional community partnerships and incentive programs, for example, grants and educational programs to plant more trees on private lands. And I can speak to that to provide clarification if needed.
It's moved by Councillor Hamilton and seconded by Deputy Mayor Thompson that motion 23-G-082 of Section D of the Second General Committee report dated April 5th, 2023 concerning the private tree bylaw and ecological offsetting review be amended as follows. 1, that paragraphs 1 and 2 be deleted and the remaining paragraphs be renumbered accordingly. Number 2, that the private tree bylaw 2014-115 be amended under definitions to add the following definition. A certified arborist means a person who is a specialist or expert in the area of the care and maintenance of trees and includes a graduate of post-secondary education in arboriculture qualified by Skilled Trades Ontario, or a certified arborist qualified by the International Society of Arboriculture, a consulting arborist registered with the American Society of Consulting Arborists, a registered professional forester, or a person with other similar qualifications as approved by the director. Number 3, that the following be added to the end of the new paragraph 1. With woodlots with an area greater than 0.5 hectares in the Nottawasaga Conservation areas purchased prior to April 5th, 2023 being exempt from these fees. 4, that the following be added to the end of the new paragraph 3. Explore additional community partnerships and incentive programs, for example, grants and educational programs to plant more trees on private lands. Councillor Hamilton, would you like the floor?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor Nuttall. I just want to start by thanking staff for putting together a really comprehensive report that looked at the current bylaw and outlined possible opportunities for change and improvements. I will say it took me a couple of reads to really grasp the depth of some of the analysis that was done, so thank you for your patience with my questions and really great work all around, so thank you. The amendment before us that I've provided here does include the updated definition to an arborist, and again, this is to become in line with current industry standards and also based on feedback that we've heard from the field. The second component of the amendment has to do with the ecological offsetting program that we heard tonight again. And just to clarify, this used to be under the purview of the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority and the Nottawasaga. Under Bill 23, it is no longer. And so the City of Barrie is inputting the ecological offsetting fees. But we are allowing an exemption for woodlots purchased prior to April 5th, 2023 in the Nottawa Conservation Authority areas. And this is really sort of a grandfathering because these areas would not otherwise have been exposed to the ecological programming under the purview of the Nottawasaga Conservation. So that's clarity on that piece. And finally, I would say to provide clarity on the last component about the partnerships and incentives program, this amendment does not result in any increased regulatory controls on private trees as a result of introducing new fees or permits. But what it does do is focus on incentive programs, community partnerships, and education to plant more trees, which we heard tonight is a huge success factor in building our tree canopy. And if you've read the report clearly and looked at other municipalities, we can see that the most successful individual tree bylaws focus on incentives for replanting, they focus on grants to plant more trees on private lands, and they focus on education programs. The cost to administer individual tree bylaws are several hundred thousands of dollars, which we also saw in the report. It requires significant staff resources, which we've seen, and you can look to other municipalities, and also significant law enforcement support. Yet what we've also learned from other municipalities is that compliance with these restrictive individual tree bylaws, where there are the introduction of new fees, is quite low. I also was really pleased to see the survey and the work that the staff has done with residents to get their feedback on this as well. And I wanted to point out that a large number of residents surveyed did not know that Barrie had a private tree bylaw. Instead of creating more restrictions and a more regulated bylaw, perhaps we need to spend more time on educating the public, educating our residents on what's in the current bylaw to ensure compliance. As we heard tonight, an individual who provided the delegation didn't even know how to designate a tree as heritage. Perhaps we need to educate the public on how we can designate trees as heritage to protect them going forward. Also, less than 50% of residents surveyed noted a need for individual private trees being further regulated. So there was not a desire for further or enhanced regulation through the introduction of permits or fees. And less than half were in favor of arborist reports being required as part of permit applications, again, as part of that fee process. And they also recognized in the survey that permit fees can also cause financial strain and result in even further lower compliance. And I know Councillor Cursor talked about this at the General Committee as well, and that financial concern on a large part of residents, and how do we handle those instances where people aren't able to pay the appropriate fees or the arborist quotes. So keeping all of that in mind, and again recognizing, which was said tonight, that over the past 10 years, with this current bylaw in place, we have seen a 5 to 8% increase growth in our current tree canopy. So I think, again, the amendments I've laid out tonight really tries to protect and preserve our tree canopy. And I think it does a better job at really trying to achieve that objective without introducing more red tape and regulations. So I'll leave it at that. And if anyone else has any comments or questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for your comments. Councillor Corser.
I just wanted to get some clarity around the restriction or non-restriction or bylaw on tree removal on private property. My concern is my ward, as many others, have some large old lots and big houses that are being purchased up for only investment and rental. And then they put a second suite in the yard, and now you've clear-cut a yard. There is no incentive for a private investor on a piece of property to plant more trees. It's just a business investment to them, and I'm wondering if there's a second suite going to be put in. Is there any investigation done, I guess through you, Mayor Nuttall, to is there any consideration for, in this current bylaw, for having any investigation on trees being removed for large construction, second suites, etc., large garages on residential properties?
For you, Mayor Nuttall, I'll defer this question to Mr. Rankin.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, the current existing tree bylaw would require permits if the trees are part of a half-acre or larger woodlot. But if it was individual trees on a lot that didn't have a woodlot included on it, there would be no tree bylaw requirements.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Mr. Rankin. Now, so does that mean the new proposed change in bylaw will remain the same, that there would be no investigation or no consideration of trees being cut down on properties that are getting large second suites or large garages on them? So it will remain the same as it is now. There will be no double checking that, or any removal fee or a conversation with an arborist? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Corser, if I understand your question, if the amendment goes through on the floor and the current bylaw remains the same, then yes. This is a simple answer.
So there wouldn't there would not be any arborist or, sorry, I'm just really struggling with understanding this one point. If like I was discussing with Mayor Nuttall, I don't agree with the city trying to control things that happen on private residential property to an extreme. But it's a consideration when the property is not owned by anyone who has a personal vested interest in the tree canopy of the community, if you will. So that is where my concern comes in with larger. So as it stands, the previous bylaw does not call for any arborist investigation fee or anything else. And the proposed bylaw does not call for any type of investigation, arborist fee, etc. Correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Courser, correct. The current bylaw in place today does not require arborist reports or fees or permits unless the trees are part of an ecological woodlot, half an acre or larger. The proposed bylaw that was in the staff report would require investigations through an arborist report and permits for all construction-related activities.
Okay, thank you. So that answers my question. Thank you very much. Incredibly confusing, a lot of papers to go through. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. Rankin.
Councillor Rittman.
Two questions, I think. The first one is, does this amendment solve the delegation, Ms. Pratt's issue? And I think it does. I see you nodding. Okay, that's a good thing. The second question is, I think, related to Councillor Courser's question, and that is, with the proposed amendment, would there be any review or control of trees that are being removed in the built-up area? I guess that was to Councillor Hamilton.
I'll take a stab at it, but I might defer. I would just read, so in entirety in the amendment, number 3 saying that staff in the Development Services and Operations Department form a tree bylaw standards subcommittee that includes representatives from the Land Development and Professional Consulting Company, community. Again, we heard deputation tonight, people eager to get involved in that, to review and update tree protection standards, to explore additional community partnerships and incentive programs, the grants, and educational programs to plant more trees on private lands. So still work being done in that space, again, looking at how do we protect our tree canopy without introducing fees and permits, red tape, regulations.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. First question through the CAO, probably Ms. Banfield would probably be the best. Just to clarify, when it comes to dealing with trees, especially I know second suites were brought up in garages and stuff. When it comes to dealing with trees, that would be dealt with through the planning process, would it not?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, it actually depends on whether or not the tree is part of a woodlot or whether it's a single tree. So if it's a single tree, no, it's not really looked at. If it's part of a woodlot, it is. And we work very closely with Mr. Rankin's team on those permits.
Great, thank you. And I assume probably every lot that we've seen these second suites go into are probably not large enough to be classified as a woodlot. Am I safe in saying that?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, there have been a few that have actually qualified, but what we actually are seeing is just amendments to those permits. Like they start with, potentially one tree, and then as they start getting into construction, they tend to return to Mr. Rankin and need to revise that. So we are definitely seeing those infill projects being quite tricky with the tree removal piece.
Okay, great, thanks. I will support this. I do agree, and I raised this concern last week, that this is basically an additional tax on our residents. I'm not seeing or hearing that we've got a significant issue with residents cutting trees down for unbeknownst reasons other than the fact that the tree may have been dead. And without that type of data before me, I just don't know that we can really justify. It appears to me that we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. And so I do appreciate the amendment that came forward, and I will support it. And especially too, we've heard from one of our own arborists in town, and I know I had quite a lengthy telephone conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, and he brings a good light to this too from someone in the industry, and bringing his professional opinion about the fact that education is key to this, because I have a feeling if we come out with a bylaw that people won't respect, they'll just cut trees down and just avoid the bylaw and hope that their neighbor doesn't call on them. And whereas I think this route is going to avoid that, and also too it will allow this committee to form, and we then may see further changes down the road. I kind of look at this as baby steps, and at least we're moving in one direction, which I think is the right direction, but without jumping to the full thing, because I did have my concerns. So I am really happy to see the amendment come forward, and also this is a reduction in the cost to run this program too, which is another key piece. So I'll leave my comments at that, but I definitely will support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and I apologize I wasn't able to be there in person tonight, and appreciate the amendment, and I think many of us have had lots of conversations with residents about the concern about, the loss of autonomy to make decisions on your property. If I go back to the root of this, pun intended, it really came around the discussion, and Ms. Kolbetch had framed it quite nicely, in these mature neighborhoods where the properties were now being redeveloped into 3 units, and often the detached secondary dwelling was the place where the trees were sacrificed, often mature trees, often healthy trees, and in some situations, really, unfortunately, and we've changed some rules to bylaws to make it less likely. The excavation of trees impacted neighbors' trees, and that was really one of the most challenging situations that we experienced in Allendale, with secondary attached dwellings being able to have basements and be quite large and quite close to lot lines. People's trees that weren't on the property were being compromised. And I appreciate what Councillor Corser was moving towards, and what Councillor Harvey had noted as well. We don't want to, make a bylaw that impacts property owners who are maintaining their property and making changes and such. But I wondered, with the effort around the detached secondary dwelling units and the impact and the number of trees that have been sacrificed for those units, is it possible, is it allowable, maybe through you, Mayor Nuttall, to staff to have an additional requirement in the attached secondary dwelling unit that accommodates for tree cutting specifically? I know we have had some trees saved because of the woodlot provision, so that has happened. But maybe I'll stop there and ask that question as far as, is that something we can add to either the attached secondary dwelling process, or separately, or to this bylaw? Thank you.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. So ultimately, through Bill 23, there is less and less touch points on second and third suites. So the short answer is no. Second and third suites would just be going straight to building permit. And unless there was a bylaw that was applicable law for the CBO to look at prior to issuing a permit, there wouldn't be a touch point to look at trees specifically.
Okay, and thank you. Maybe for those, the vernacular touch point, can you describe a bit more when you say there'll be fewer touch points? Can you give a bit of a definition of what that means?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. Previous council and people that follow planning and council closely might recall that the previous council did look at doing what was called a scoped site plan for second suites and detached units that would look at things that we heard were important to the community, like tree preservation, driveway locations, grading. Through some of the changes at the provincial level, any sort of scoped site plan work for second and third suites is no longer permitted. They're supposed to go straight to building permit. When they go straight to building permit, there's obviously things, and I'm not the CBO, but there's things that the CBO looks at before they can issue a permit. One of those things is applicable law, and that would be what would be looked at that time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm hearing that with the changes that those controls, such as related to trees, or you mentioned driveways and things, are no longer within our scope of authority?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. They're looked at through building permit, not through planning permissions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Banfield. I appreciate your comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kungl and then Councillor Ritma.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have about 3 lines of question. I'll start directing them at staff. So through you, if I may, I'll assume to Mr. Rankin. In particular, in past conversations we've had, and in that broad and very comprehensive report, all of the recommendations, except for maybe one, talked about diameter of trees. And a particular aspect of that report talked a bit about the importance of protecting the mature canopy. And I know we've seen, so I'm looking at the amendment, but I just want to clarify, because most of the questions I'm receiving have to do with, I think, what came forward that did not focus on a recommendation tied to diameter, but did tie to height. And I believe that was also tied to private. And so I'm seeing a lot of redactions, but I just want to be clear that through this change, for those watching tonight that may still be looking at what does that mean around the tree on my lawn, am I correct in seeing that based on the amendments, there's nowhere else in then the, should it be approved, the amended bylaw by which there's a particular height or diameter classification of a tree that would trigger any type of engagement before one could take it down on a private property?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungl, under the proposed or current bylaw and what would be then the new bylaw, it would rely on the definition of an ecological woodlot, which is set within the bylaw. So any tree that is part of a half an acre or larger woodlot, irrespective of property boundaries, would be then continue to be regulated under the bylaw.
Great, thank you. So nothing around specific individual trees, nothing related to height or diameter, if I could just clarify for those that were kind of watching and giving comment to kind of the tree size.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungl, that's right. There's nothing in the current bylaw related to size or height. It's set on the area of the woodlot ecologically, so half an acre or larger, in any tree that's within that woodlot.
Okay, thank you. My next question I might direct to the clerk because it might be more procedural, and it kind of aligns to what I took from Councillor Harvey's conversation around baby steps. And knowing that this is a really comprehensive piece, it was great to hear the feedback that this is a great step that we're taking. Knowing that there is going to be a subcommittee engaged, my understanding, and if the clerk could correct me if I'm wrong, is that a matter before council, once it's motioned on, cannot come back to council for, I believe, 6 months. When we talk a bit about a bylaw and/or...
Sorry, Councillor, without 2/3 majority.
Right, without 2/3 majority. So it can come back earlier than 6 months. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Does that apply to it having to be on the matter of the bylaw as a whole, as per this agenda item, or can we still bring amendments to a bylaw that we've approved, say tonight, without having to have that type of 2/3 motion? So how do we treat kind of implementing a brand new type of bylaw and bringing learnings back and actually then making any amendments? Does it still tie to formalities about how it comes back to council?
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle. The amendment that's currently on the floor removes the passage or the consideration of a new bylaw. So we would obviously revert back to the current bylaw that we have in place. So amendments could be brought forward to the current bylaw that is in place without any kind of reconsideration motion.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then I guess last question, and I didn't hear that it kind of tied to the questioning for Councillor Harris had to you, Ms. Banfield, but if I could, through Mayor Nuttall to you, Ms. Banfield, ask about how would such a bylaw get addressed or applied at Committee of Adjustment? So for me, you know, assuming that some approved developments might go there for changes or minor variances, should it then impact this type of bylaw around tree preservation? How does a Committee of Adjustment apply such a bylaw to their decision making?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle. So Committee of Adjustment's a bit different. So if Committee of Adjustment was actually asked to make a decision and the committee had an issue with the tree, they could actually condition doing a tree study or a tree inventory or conversation about tree removals, like a tree planting. They could condition that with or without a bylaw. If there is a bylaw, then all bylaws always apply forever. But if a Committee of Adjustment, the committee itself could make that part of the decision if they so chose.
Okay, thank you. I'm pleased to see the progress that's been made from, I think, conversations through resident needs to where we are now with, I think, a really great first step around what hopefully will be passed tonight. I'm fully supportive of it.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. And Councillor Rittma, I believe I had you on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm of two minds on this amendment a little bit, and that is I'm pleased to hear that the ecological offsetting is going to go ahead, and that the concerns raised by Ms. Pratt are addressed, because I think that makes perfect sense. I'm a little more distressed about the private trees on private properties, and it's probably because I represent Ward 1, where we do have a large canopy, and that people have a lot of concerns about the tree cutting. However, I am going to support this amendment for two reasons. One, we're having a committee established that are going to look at all the other standards and things that we need to look at. And I'm hoping that they will bring back something that will give us some sort of management of the urban canopy as it exists today. And the reason for that largely is because when you cut down a big tree and you replace it by a little tree, you have affected the canopy. And we really want to maintain the trees that we have. I think that it's instructive when we listen to our experts here that they've all come forward excuse me, and said this is a progressive bylaw, and it's something proactive, and it's something that is showing leadership, and we should be doing that. And so I am going to, I'm very much in support of the bylaw. I'll support the amendment as well because I want to find an alternative, and I hope our staff will find an alternative to adding more burdens to individuals when it comes to trees and saving the city money. I don't think we should be putting in a huge bureaucracy to try to resolve a problem that doesn't exist. And I think I'm comforted by that, by the fact that we have, at least I have, had no further issues with respect to third suites since we passed the zoning amendment that we did. And I forget when it was, but a couple of years ago. I think before we passed that amendment, there were some significant issues with basements and all that kind of thing. I think we may have nipped that one in the bud, and and if we did, then I think we may have solved the problem elsewhere through the zoning bylaw. So those are my comments. I'm hoping that this committee, which I'm really pleased is going to have representatives from the industry and from the experts on it. I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say and when they come back to us with their report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rittman. Are there any other questions or comments around the table? Seeing none. Just before we go to vote, number one, I got a few notes here I wanted to throw out there with regards to the amendment. So, City Council, we go through the General Committee portion, then we come to City Council. It does give us the time to reflect. We had an extra week this time around, which I think helped in this scenario. But it does give us the time to reflect and to be able to listen to some of the either questions or concerns or items that are coming through. And so when members of the public like Johnny who are reaching out to us are able to communicate those items, and then we have a Councillor Hamilton, who's been able to reflect, I believe, a lot of the items that were outlined in the amendment here tonight. It is our processes here at City Hall working, and it's certainly our democratic principles working. With regards to the piece of the amendment that touches on the Nottawasaga, so there's clearly been a difference in the approach by the Lake Simcoe Conservation from the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority. And I don't believe there was any premise inside of staff's decision-making process to increase the regulation. It was to adopt and then process. But in the process of doing that, there was some oversights with regards to the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority. So I believe that through the amendments that Councillor Hamilton has brought forward tonight, there is a consistency with the existing regulatory environment as per the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority being respected. The other piece I just want to, because we want to make sure we're being transparent on what the changes are or aren't. And inside that amendment, there's a date, right? And that date, I think it's April, I have it in front of me, April 5th, 2023. And with my reading of this, it essentially means that if the lands change hands after today, that the grandfathering essentially falls off. And the reason I want to highlight that for the public is this, is that it's both respecting the current regime that existed underneath the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority, but it's actually striving towards a stronger environmental regulation going forward. I think it provides both fairness for current property owners. In the case of the deputant this evening, a property that was purchased from the county, then regulated by the Conservation Authority, and at the same time, we are communicating what the goals are through this process. Sometimes we can't make all the change in one day. Sometimes it needs to take place incrementally. And so Councillor Hamilton and our staff who quickly changed based on the information that was provided by the deputant earlier, thank you for doing that, because I think it really is going to help us as a city going forward. Finally, one of the changes through this, I think, is going to be a reduction in the required number of new staff. And at the same time, we do have to hire another public servant here to replace the work that was being done at the conservation authorities with regards to ecological offsets. And I just want to communicate based on some of the communications that we've received in the mayor's office. Like, there's already going to be, if not already received, hundreds of thousands of dollars in ecological offsetting happening. And before this, I'm not sure that we could ever say that we saw the benefit. Maybe the benefit was happening, maybe it wasn't. But after this, we can measure it. And if we can't measure something, we'll never know if it's happening. But if we can then determine the results. And hopefully, Johnny can stand up here in another decade and say we've gone from 30.5 up to whatever it is for the true canopy in our city. And hopefully, that aspirational piece with regards to lands in the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority will be able to preserve some of that in the southwest part of the city as well. So I'll call the vote now. And this is on the amendment, and then after the amendment, it'll be on the main motion. So all those in favor? And it carries unanimously. On the main motion as amended, are there any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall. So this was a tough one. Like, we thought we were doing it this way, and then, you know, with some consultation through community members and stakeholders and all that. And I think we've landed in a really good spot with the amendment today. And, a councillor said we were adding a level of, I guess, checks and balances, like a burden. And I'm so uncomfortable with that. We should never add a burden to build. And that's why we're in housing crisis. And I think with our amendment on the second suites, we've slowed them down. And, maybe Ms. Banfield will be able to say, we have them being built now, but that was the rush before the amendment. And I don't think we're seeing much. Now, with the offsets, property lines, to Councillor Harris's point, it was digging the foundation and basement of the neighboring property that damaged a tree, which we've stopped that. They're no longer able to do that. And then with the 7-meter offsets as the existing, we've created the burden. Like, we're not building very many. But on the tree side, I think we've got it right. I really do. And staff did an excellent job. And then realizing everything and coming back and helping with the amendment, I think this is a great first step, and we'll see where it goes. But I don't know if we ever had a tree bylaw problem. I think we had a second suite problem, which created a tree problem. Some people hide behind the tree because they don't want a second suite in their backyard. And I think that's some of the problem. But I really do believe that staff did an excellent job, and I appreciate the time they've spent with a lot of councillors and our stakeholders and members of the community and in the industry, which this is how you get to a good point. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the council? Seeing none, I will... Oh, Councillor Harris, I apologize.
Can you hear me now? Oh, I'm having trouble. Sorry. Jeez. Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you. I just it's I'm having a little bit of trouble with technology, so I just wanted to just check. I know at the end of Ms. Kolbach's presentation, I thought I received a compliment. Did Deputy Mayor Thompson call me an old tree? Sorry. Anyway, thanks. I support the motion.
That was a strong and old one.
Oh, even strong. Okay, well, I'll take that as thank you for the compliment, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. If there's no other comments or questions, I'll ask for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I will start with Councillor Riepma.
Yes.
Councillor Nixon.
Yes.
Councillor Kungle.
Yes.
Councillor Corser.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Negussi.
Yes.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Morales.
Yes.
Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
And Mayor Nuttall.
Yes.
The motion carries.
That was the update from the City Hall. Thanks for watching.